time to introduce Stewart Walters, and he's going to talk us through points A, Australia, through to QR quantum resistance. So big round of applause for Stewart.
Hi, I'm Stewart, and let's get into this, I guess. Except my mouse isn't working. There it is. Yep. Okay. So I'm the Managing Director and Principal Consultant at Bespoke IT Proprietary Limited, a boutique consultancy out of WA that works national-wide. But I'm also a casual lecturer at TAFE, President-elect of the IC2 WA chapter and co-administrator of the Dottam Club. Also not an IRAP assessor. I'm just going to put that in there. Cough, cough, yet. I work on principally confidentiality and integrity problems. I do a lot of crypto work and authentications, app control, that sort of thing. And not that I normally care to sort of print out my resume, but these sorts of jobs here I've just listed just because it kind of relates to some of the skill sets required to sort of do this kind of work. So I've previously been a Unix administrator that deals a lot with DNS and LDAP, Windows administrator with specialities in Active Directory design and implementations. I'm a cryptography specialist, particularly in TLS and PKI design and implementations and audit. And for the last maybe decade or something like that, I've been working as a solutions architect, security architect, enterprise architect, you can call it whatever you want. These four roles in my career history have a common thread amongst them in that they all deal with hierarchies. You wouldn't think that they would relate to each other, but in the context of PKI they do. It's very hierarchical. And so it does help to have a grasp on how hierarchies fail within systems. Today we're going to cover the topics of some of the reasons that Australian organisations get cryptography and key management wrong, the philosophies and principles behind sound cryptography and key management. We're going to explore some of the coming shifts in the field of academic and applied cryptography and why in our information systems it's necessary for change, and what organisations can do to change themselves to reduce their future risks. And I hope, not that it's actually necessary to do quantum resistance, but I hope we demystify quantum resistance a bit for people, particularly quantum computing. We cover a little of that, but it's not actually necessary to deal with quantum resistance. It's a completely different field. All right, I use some very specific terminology in this talk, so I'm going to list them here. When I say due care and skill, that's a legal term, but when used here, I mean it to be an acceptable level of skill or technical knowledge was used and all necessary steps to avoid loss or damage were performed. But I will add in a caveat emptor there. I'm not a lawyer. You should not interpret this as legal advice. If you need legal advice on the legal terminology around due care and skill, please go seek legal advice for that. I also talk quite a bit about what's reasonably secure. And I define that as due care and skill was applied, known vulnerabilities were removed or reduced to acceptable levels that a skilled person would be reasonably expected to make. When I say insecure, I'm generally meaning not operating safely. If I say not operating reasonably secure or not reasonably secure, I'm also meaning not operating safely. And I don't tend to use this much, I don't think, but not operating safely over long periods of time might mean you're negligent. So why all these business terms? This is about cryptography, is it not? Well, yes it is, but when you're trying to change an entire organisation's perspective on cryptography and key management, it's quite a difficult task. It's a very complicated subject that not many people outside of people who work on cryptography solutions fully understand. And it can be very difficult to get change within Australian organisations to move to what we know is a good working state, but they're not there yet, and they don't have the skill or care to go there. So when you, as technologists, use language like the crypto system is vulnerable to breach, it doesn't hit as hard as possibly using language like due care and skill did not apply to the control of the crypto system, and the organisation may potentially be negligent if it continues to operate the crypto system in knowingly unsafe ways that it does. I find leveraging business language when taking matters of cryptography up the chain far more effective in trying to get them to listen to what you're talking about. It's inherently hard to talk about cryptography to anyone, except for those who sort of deal with it directly. But hopefully some of that language might help if you're having to go through this process yourself. All right, a bit of a tangent. This talk is about cryptography, but we kind of have to take you back a little bit further than that into a bit of philosophy to understand why cryptography actually matters. So I'm not sure if you're aware, it's almost impossible for you to prove that you are secure. You can think you are secure. That's an opinion. You can believe that. That's a belief, and sometimes a mistaken one. You can feel that you're secure, which is usually intuition, feelings or emotions, however you want to phrase that. You can state that you're secure, but that doesn't necessarily make it so, and they are claims or assertions. And you can you can try to reason with yourself that the available evidence that you have before you is a conclusion of secure is true, but that doesn't always make it so. It's improbable and impossible for you to completely and irrefutably prove that you are 100% secure. You can do the opposite, however, which is sometimes a little strange. You can disprove you are secure, or put it another way, you can prove your insecurity. That's because secure is not a fact. It's never been a fact and never will be a fact. It's a value. Anyone trying to tell you that they are secure might be knowingly using it as a value or deluding themselves that it is a matter of fact, or knowing that it is a value but hoping you will believe it is a fact. So when you have conversations around the word secure, I find it much better to use the term reasonably secure. So to better understand all this, we're going to need to dig into a bit of philosophy. We're going to skip epistemology, aesthetics versus ethics, also known as form versus function, and the demarcation problem of science. But if you have an interest in this, I'd highly recommend you go read up on these subjects. So one of my favourite philosophers, I guess you could say, is David Hume. He's a Scottish thinker from the 18th century. He was a philosopher, historian and economist, and he gave us advances in the field of philosophy relating to empiricism. My sense of humour at 3 a.m. in the morning is a little weird. Hume came up with the is-ought problem, and that can be sometimes referred to as Hume's law or Hume's guillotine. I've heard it referred to as Hume's fork as well. For visual learners, neurodivergent, and some speed runners, here's a 1:30 video explaining the is-ought problem. I'm not going to play it today, but there's the link. You can play at home once you see this video. Related to Hume's law is what Hume himself called the fact-value distinction. Hume puts forward that his is-ought problem, Hume puts forward in his is-ought problem that when people reason about the world around them, there's a gap between their statements of fact, which usually expressed as true or false, and their judgments of reason, which is usually expressed as right or wrong or good or bad. So an example of this is, I say to you, what a wonderful day it is. What a wonderful day today is. Now, first off, we need to kind of look at that statement and determine which of the words are facts and which are values. So today is a fact. Today's happened. We can prove that from most places on Earth. Today might also be a fact if you ignore a bunch of philosophy and physics that says time doesn't exist. If we take the word wonderful and reduce it down to something similar, what's being said there is that today is good. So wonderful meaning good, wonderful is the value in the sentence. But what facts did I come to rely on to say that today is wonderful? Is it that the sky is sunny and blue, or is it that today is Friday and the weekend is soon? Is it that I'm not at work today and instead I'm attending Canberra NerdCon InfoSec edition? Is it that I've seen many of my friends today and that makes me feel good? Or is it because I've lured 3,000 delegates here with the prospect of talking about cryptography and I'm actually talking to them about philosophy in some kind of bait and switch move that I find amusing? Unless you ask more questions about the statements of fact that led to the judgment of reasoning, that the day is wonderful in my opinion, or, you know, according to my judgment, you won't truly know if the facts meet the value judgment. I promise you it's the bait and switch on the philosophy, to be honest. But what if my assertion that the sky is sunny and blue was false? Because right now the sky might be grey and raining. Or maybe you just hate philosophy because you hate being smart. I don't know. We may never know. And I can't move my screen again. Sorry. There we go. All right. Understanding Hume's law helps us see that people mess up their facts to value transition quite a bit. Sometimes facts aren't facts at all either. Sometimes people include assertions which are unverified claims of fact, opinions, their beliefs, their biases, or whatever it suits them on the day because they just don't want to hear what you're talking about. And then they reach to incorrect judgment values. For example, statements like, our crypto system is secure, with no or little factual backing to that value judgment. So some quick takeaways on Hume and the is-ought problem and the fact-value distinction. People, even in our own industry, get the fact-value distinction pretty wrong, and sometimes quite a lot. When someone talks about we should or we ought to, they're talking about values, not facts, and that's important. That sometimes can tell you what they're talking about. Also, when we're talking about facts versus values, what we're actually talking about is science versus ethics. We need both ethics and science in our InfoSec industry, but the industry is nevertheless a scientific discipline. That means we need to follow the facts, particularly when auditing or assessing any system, to be honest, but I mean in the context of crypto systems. There's more to all of this if you study it as a matter of philosophy, but for our purposes on the talk today, I don't go much deeper into it. I do, there's a postscript note there that says, the reason why sales and marketing teams call their differentiators to competitors' products and services value propositions is because they're selling you on a value statement, not a fact, a matter of fact. They know that values make sales, not facts. And so when you look at the claims of a vendor or you look at the claims of a product or service that's been delivered to your organisation, you do need to weed out, sometimes I find it's helpful to weed out the value statements from the facts and try to see if the facts will actually meet those values. That does sometimes expose some insecurity in systems. All right, then we drop into Sir Karl Popper. He's an Austrian-British thinker from the 20th century, philosopher of many schools of philosophy. He introduced falsifiability, problem of induction, and the problem of demarcation. We won't be going much into Popper's philosophical work except for his observations on pseudoscience versus science. For visual learners, again, playing at home, you might find this video a little more easier to deal with than my voice, but you can watch that at home if you need to. Popper studied, if you're not aware, Popper studied how Sigmund Freud developed his psychoanalytical theories on human behaviour and how Einstein developed his general theory of relativity. Whereas Freud sought to use past data to prove his theories on human behaviour, Einstein used future events to attempt to disprove his own theories of the universe. So what's the implications of that? Why is that important? Freud's methods allow Freud, or anyone for that matter, to reinterpret their past events over and over again without requiring them to concede that the theories have been proven to be untrue. Whereas Einstein's methods, on the other hand, was actively looking to disprove his own work, because if he couldn't disprove his theory, he might be one step closer to being true. So in short, Einstein's methods, which Popper calls science, remove the possibility of pride, ego, or falseness from affecting the results. And this is converse to Freud's methods, which Popper calls pseudoscience. So bringing this back to secure, reasonably secure, and insecure. When I audit crypto systems, I'm often documenting to customers the evidentiary facts as I can see them, which demonstrates their systems are flawed or broken. And especially the ones that can lead to full system compromise. I wish I could say I've had fantastic customers over the years, but I can't genuinely remember the last time I didn't break a PKI. Such as the state of cryptography in Australia, possibly, or maybe I just have a bias because I work with customers that need help. But usually the first question I immediately get back from the customer after doing that is, but do you actually have any proof that we've been compromised? And my answer is more or less along these lines. It's usually a bit terse, I try not to be, but my answer to the question every single time is that I'm sorry, it's not my job to prove to you that you have been breached in the multiple years that you've been operating that crypto system. It's your organisation's job to prove to me, the PKI specialist, that you have been operating that PKI with due care and skill, such that I'm in a position to say that you've been running it reasonably secure. If you want to know it was breached, go hire digital forensics. If you want to know if it can be breached, go hire Pentest Red Team. That's what they do. But if you cannot demonstrate to me with facts that you hold sufficient evidence about how the crypto system was operated with due care and skill, then it actually is secure to me. It's an assumed breach position within cryptography. We'll get into why that is in a little bit. But I simply say this, show me the facts that you have been operating with due care and skill, and anything else is the assumed full breach, whether it is or not. We'll come back, sorry, I've said that already. So let's look at the problems with the questions, why the question, sorry, the problem with the question that was asked at all. The problem with the customer asking me something like that, a defensive security specialist, to supply them with conclusive proof that they've been breached, it becomes a threefold problem. So unless it's glaringly obvious that evidence exists, by answering it all, I risk wandering outside of my speciality. As a PKI specialist, I exercise due care and skill pertaining to PKIs. But can I say the same if I were to suddenly do some pen testing or digital forensic analyst work? Maybe, maybe not. There's also the problem of absence of evidence is never evidence of absence. Just because I go looking for evidence of a breach doesn't mean I find it, but that doesn't mean a breach didn't occur. The adversary might have been very, very good at tidying up their tracks, or I may be very, very bad at, digital forensics work. This one's the most insidious one though, and I experienced this a lot in trying to move organisations forward with cryptography systems, and that is that regardless if the breach did occur or not, hidden within the question is an implied assertion to the contrary. That because they're saying have you actually seen the breach, they're putting in an assumption that they were secure in the first place, or that they were ever secure. This is unfortunately peak pseudoscience, and we experience a lot of it in the tech sector, and especially I experience a lot in crypto system auditing and design. You know, you get statements like AI is intelligent and can do as good, if not better, than humans. Blockchain is commercially viable and will decentralize currency. I won't announce that one because I know I put that in there to annoy some friends of mine with risk management tendencies. But anyway, quantum computers will help us solve complex problems quickly. These kind of statements don't have facts behind them. There's lots of values, but until the facts come forth, and maybe they never will, we can't actually say this. Well, you can make the claim, but it's not a matter of fact. And PKI and evidentiary controls around PKI need to operate on fact. So to those sorts of people who say these things, I say maybe you're right, but please do prove that with facts so that I can assess whether the facts of the situation meet the value judgment that you're claiming to be. And I probably have a few facts of my own which can cast doubt on or partially refute or fully refute, possibly even completely disprove those value judgments. The burden of proof is always on the claimant, so let all the facts be tallied, and then and only then we should probably assign the value judgment if the system is good or bad. So in short, if you're going to claim that or imply your crypto system is secure, bring me as many facts as you can muster, and I can tell you whether it's insecure outright because I found lack of controls, or I found lack of evidence of controls, or I found the breach, or on the balance of probabilities, do I believe it to be reasonably secure absence of any evidence of the contrary. This was a joke for those people who actually know this philosophy. I pretty much butchered a lot to get to that point. That's the man that probably can refute just about everything I just said, but I'm not using philosophy here to teach philosophy. I'm using it to teach science. All right, another tangent, 50% less tangent. Okay, we're going to get to some of the philosophies and principles behind sound cryptography and key management. Something that I find is lacking in a lot of the systems I audit, unfortunately. And it's the lack of this that usually is where I find a break somewhere. Okay. So Kirchhoff, I'm going to butcher his name. I think he's Austrian, but it's always a hard one to pronounce. Kirchhoff's principle. There were 6 of them, but the one we adhere to most in cryptography design is the second design principle of military ciphers from Kirchhoff's, or AKA Kirchhoff's principle. And it's it's the basis of all modern cryptographic algorithms. Prior to that, it was steganography, and that wasn't very effective. So this is kind of where true cryptography happens. But Kirchhoff says it should not require secrecy, and it should not be a problem if it falls into enemy hands. Fast forward to 1930, Claude Shannon's work in information theory produces Shannon's maxim. Shannon's maxim was either independently derived from Kirchhoff's or is based on it, and we don't really know. But it's considered a reformation of the same idea. And Shannon's maxim states that one ought to design systems under the assumption that the enemy will immediately gain full familiarity of them. These two principles or philosophies, you might want to call them, do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to sound cryptography and key management design. And we can reform both of them into a modern version which becomes secrets must remain secret. And that sounds pretty obvious when you say it aloud, but you'd be surprised how often sysadmin teams and organisations break this rule a lot, and it leads to theoretical or practical breaks in crypto systems. All right, but more specifically on secrets must remain secret. A crypto system should be secure if everything about the system except for its critical components is public knowledge. And the critical components are defined as, at the very least, your private keys must remain secret. Your initialization vectors must remain secret. Your nonces, a number used once, must remain secret and only be used one time. They must never be reused. And random numbers must remain secret, and they must be truly random when they are generated. They must not be predictable, nor must they be pseudo-random. This is an all or nothing proposition in cryptography. Either you can demonstrate proof that the critical components of your crypto system have remained secure, or they are inherently insecure. There's no granularity in a break in cryptography. It's so, and particularly PKIs, that product is so brittle. It is not how we would build a secure protocol today. It's just very ancient in its design. It's simultaneously one of the best and worst things we have. It is powering all the encryption on the internet, and yet it's about 40 to 50 years old and has a lot of problems with it, and no one even talks about what do we do to replace it. People have tried and it didn't happen. So. But for now, you have to know that you either have proof that those critical components are safe or that they are just insecure. There's no third option when crypto systems are concerned. All right, when a crypto system is not able to be proven that secrets have remained suspected, or it is suspected and or proven that the secret has become public knowledge, your only viable option to remove that publicly known secret is to replace it with a privately held secret. In the case of private keys becoming public knowledge, we call that process rekeying. It's hugely disruptive, but it's the only way to be sure that you hold the secret and no one else holds the secret. For example, if I find a breach all the way up to your root CA, you have to untrust everything and reissue every single certificate in your organisation. It's a massive cost and a huge amount of time to deal with. It can be done, it's just you don't want to. So as a PKI specialist, if you cannot prove to me that your secrets remain secret, or I suspect that they have not remained secret, or there is demonstrable proof that those secrets did not remain secret, then I will tell you that this crypto system is no longer worthy of your trust, as it is insecure, and that you need to immediately rekey your crypto system for your own protection. And anything less than this means that you're not operating safely. And if it comes down to it, if you continue to not operate safely despite being told by a PKI specialist that the crypto system is in a known bad state, then potentially your inaction to restore secrecy to your own systems might constitute negligence, say if you're breached. 3 a.m. here, it's not good. All right, so people, process and technology. I've been really happy. I'm an architect. This is an architecture concept, and it's been in architecture for some time, but around 5 to 6 years ago I started witnessing people within the InfoSec community talking about these things, which is great. Believe it or not, architecture is not supposed to be solely practiced by architects. It was always intended that architects not only practice architecture themselves, but they help you practice architecture. That's the point. It's an all-organisational thing, or at least it's meant to be. That's not how it works in practice. But the point is that architects are there to help you practice your architecture. They're not the guardians of all architecture. So I'm happy to see this concept come into InfoSec community around 5, 6 years. I started seeing that within talks. But something I've noticed since then is that some of our community doesn't fully understand the concept of people, process and technology. I thought I would just quickly address that. If you have a people problem, it's best to implement a fix to the people. Likewise, if you have a process problem, it's best to implement the fix to the process. And if you have a technology problem, go fix the technology. It's not exactly forbidden to use one on the others if that works, but more often than not, you're probably implementing the wrong kind of fix. I've seen more organisations than I care to count try to fix people problems with poorly conceived technology that could have just had a frank conversation with their own staff and then work things out. Unfortunately, this happens quite a lot in IT, and it does happen a bit in InfoSec. I mention that because most organisations' key management woes are a result of instigated failures in people and process as much as they are failures of technology. So simply buying key management solution and expecting that will resolve the underlying cultural problems in your organisation is not going to go well for you. You will have spent a lot of money on a solution that you don't understand, can't get your people to accept, and doesn't actually become fit for purpose. So an experienced architect will usually detect when a people or process fix is easier, cheaper, or more effective than that. But I've got to say, even experienced architects do get caught on this sometimes. It's not always obvious to us when there are multiple facets to the problem in the people, process, and technology. But just be mindful not to be over-dependent on technology solutions, particularly within cryptography and key management, because you can end up buying a product that works in practice but not in your organisation. All right, we're here at cryptography, finally. And I forgot to start my timer, so I don't know how far into this talk we are. Okay, so let's talk computers, IOPS, and Moore's law. So I had to put the first few points in here just for completeness. I know you all know this. I'll just quickly buzz through it. A CPU is comprised of millions of tiny transistors on a die, and we measure each transistor state as being off or on, represented in mathematics via a 0 or 1. All right, we got past the boring bit. We also know from experience done many decades ago how fast a CPU can perform their input-outputs per second, or IOPS, required to perform the encryption and decryption operations. There's maybe 6 sources. I tend to lean heavily on Lenstra and Lenstra 2 a bit, but there are others there too. And whilst some of those are old experiments, when we combine it, I missed a step there. Those experiments were really old, like 30, 40 years old, and they relate to the CPU of the day. But when we combine those old experiments with Moore's law as a rough guide, we can generally get an understanding of how fast encryption and decryption operations work in today's CPUs. We don't actually need to do that. Lenstra's still calculating stuff, so he's still doing it on modern CPUs, and as are others. I'm just using that for today's purposes. So Moore's law being an observation that the number of transistors in an IC will double every 2 years. Ergo, CPU speed approximately doubles every 2 years, and that means that encryption and decryption operations speed up as a result. When CPUs get faster, so too do the attacks on cryptography. Which means periodically we have to increase our key sizes to accommodate growth in CPUs and processing power. All right, cryptography is in essence a study of computations over time. The broad aim of cryptography is to make it so that the cost of computations on ourselves is relatively lower than when in comparison to that of the adversary. We're trying to make the adversary's computations cost more. But periodically, the adversary's cost drops below a safe level because the ever-continuing growth of CPU. And to compensate that, we increase our key size to, which adds further cost to the adversary. All right. Show of hands, a bit dark in here, but who knows if their workplace is still using RSA 2048? And please also put your hand up if you know if you're working on a customer that's working on RSA 2048. Yeah, a couple. All right, next question. What year is it appropriate to move away from RSA 2048? If you put up your left hand if it's this year, and put up your right hand if it's next year. Oh, a couple of hands. All right, sorry, that was a trick question. I'd argue that the appropriate year to move away from RSA 2048 was probably 2021, or possibly earlier if you had larger protection requirements. Best case scenario, RSA 2048 has hit its sunset phase in 2025, giving you 5 years of total protection. Worst case, if you need longer than 5 years, it's not giving you the protection you need right now. I haven't built a PKO trust chain with RSA 2048 since prior to 2020, just to be safe. And if your organisations have, I'm sorry to say that due care and skill might not have been present. I'm going to show you how that gets calculated. So for that, you need to go to NIST SP 857 Part 1 Rev 5. The link's there if you need it. I'm not going to open the whole document. Tables 2 and 4 in that document tell you can use RSA 2048 till December 2030. And this is where I find most organisations get hung up on it. They think they're still in the grace period of using it safely. Unfortunately, then you also get to figure 2 within 857, which also gives you this. And it talks, that whole section talks about algorithm originator usage period versus algorithm security life. What it basically says, you need to reduce the years using it by how many years of protection off the back of DEC 2030. So in this example, if you expect the full protection of RSA algorithm using a modulus of 2048 bits, and you require that system to be adequately protected for 4 years, you have to stop using that algorithm no longer than 2027. But by that same rationale, if you're expecting full protection for 7 years, you have to stop using it this year. And if you're expecting it for 10 years, 2021, which is why I stopped using it back then. And 7 years sounds like enough, but I assure you it's really not. Cryptographers measure years not in 1 and 2 and 10 and 50. They're dealing with time calculations of hundreds, thousands, millions. So 7 years is quite short in a cryptographer's world. The ISM says that we should be moving off that anyway, so FedGov, StateGov and CI industry should all be on RSA 3072 or above at this point. But I would just go ahead and remove RSA 2048 from your organisations. So, a bit of a reality check, unfortunately. If I audit your PKI and I find that RSA 2048 is still in use, from next year I will report back that due care and skill is not being applied to your PKI operations and you are not operating safely. RSA is no longer fit for purpose. It was good while it was there, but it's time to move on to something else. And this is a series of changes that will need to happen over the next 15 years because we kind of got lucky, not lucky's not the right word. RSA is extremely well designed and it's quite good that it has lasted as long as it has, but we know it's not going to last forever, and algorithms historically don't last that long. So it's good that we've had it for so long, but now we need to move to other things. I would recommend you all go to, well, they say 3072 or above, and the reason for that is because the major PKI software out there, which is Microsoft ADCS, calculates step-ups on bits in a bitwise manner, so it jumps from 2048 to 4096. You actually can't do a 3072 PKI on ADCS. But if you're with ADCS, go to 4096, you'll be fine. More 3am humour. All right, let's talk about quantum computers a bit. All right, I really am going to butcher this. This is not my field. This has strayed quite massively out of it. This is closer to physics than it is mathematics and PKI. So for everyone who knows this better than I do, I'm so very sorry, but we'll press on. I've put some slides in here for your amusement or entertainment. Okay, so believe it or not though, you don't need to know much about quantum computers in order to sort of start your quantum resistant cryptography program. Some knowledge does help, but they are, as I said before, they are different scientific fields. Quantum computing is theoretical and applied quantum physics. Quantum resistant cryptography is just standard theoretical and applied mathematics. If you're writing the algorithms, that's a bit different, but if you're implementing them, it's really just maths. And quantum cryptography is theoretical and applied quantum physics and mathematics. You need I've changed the order of that. Let me just go down to the next point. Quantum resistant cryptography does not equal quantum cryptography. Just quickly, the difference between the two is the former uses mathematics on ordinary CPUs to defeat quantum attacks, whereas the latter is cryptography using entangled photons at an atomic level. And I'm sorry, this is such an oversimplified view because when you get into the physics of life, it's not me. But it is cryptography using, cryptography at an atomic scale. And that's not what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is the first step, not the second step, which is just protect ourselves from the day that quantum computers come about. And that is called quantum resistant cryptography. So just be mindful, they're two very confusing terms, and they often get swapped out, but they are different things. Now, you need a sufficiently sized quantum CPU to run quantum algorithms of any form, including the quantum algorithms that attack classical cryptography. There's two kinds of quantum processors that we that exist. We only care about one of them. There's quantum, I always pronounce this word wrong, annealing. For example, the system's made by D-Wave. And there's also quantum CPUs, and for example, the systems made by IBM, Google, and such. We don't care about D-Wave and the annealing systems. Quantum annealing processors are incapable of running quantum algorithms related to cryptography. As far as I know, they will never be important in the context of your or my concerns on quantum resistance. They're just not capable of running the algorithms to attack cryptography. So if someone comes to you and says, D-Wave just made a gazillion qubits CPU, you don't need to worry about that. This is a picture of, it's not a picture of the quantum CPU, it is a picture of the cooling system of a quantum CPU. The CPU is somewhere in there, but that's source credit from Engadget. As you can see, it's quite large, quite fancy and quite expensive. We're going to get into that just now. No, next. When a classical CPU has binary transistors and can calculate the zeros and the ones, quantum CPUs use quantum bits or qubits and a lot of physical and logical gates. My loose understanding, as I said, this is closer to physics than it is mathematics for me. But my loose understanding is that quantum CPUs and quantum mechanics works is that the quantum CPU can calculate zeros, ones, and the superposition states of both 0 and 1 at the same time. I'm going to be honest, I don't understand this part of physics. I have a concept, it's there, so will you, but whether you understand that or not is dependent on how much training in physics you've had. And my total level understanding of this is that being able to calculate additional states over just the two binary states of 0, 1 makes the quantum CPU much faster for certain types of calculations. Now, some of the quantum CPUs are being used, or it's thought that they can be used to model viral behaviour, better predict weather patterns, that sort of thing. But unfortunately, pretty much from day one, as soon as we get a sufficiently sized quantum CPU, we lose all known cryptography that we use on the internet to protect the internet. All right, so the chips are very tiny in comparison to the size of that cooling system. That's because the quantum CPUs are very error prone, and to reduce the noise or their errors, which they're very, very prone to, they need to be supercooled and they use superconducting circuits. That large and expensive heat pipe system you saw in the previous slide is there to deliver quantities and quantities of liquid nitrogen just to keep it at the required temperature to reduce the error count. That is designed to cool the quantum CPU to approximately, I think it is from memory, 2 degrees less than space. And you read that sentence wrong if you were reading it. Not 2 degrees lower than the temperature of Earth, but 2 degrees lower than the cold vacuum of space. That's very, very cold. My best guesstimate, I'm not a physicist, but that's somewhere in the vicinity of negative 270 degrees centigrade. Though there are improvements currently in the works to make hotter running quantum CPUs, which means they will be cheaper to cool. Because of that extreme cooling solution needed to make these work, you will probably never hold a quantum CPU in a phone-sized device in this lifetime, or at least in the next 40 years. That statement would become false if room temperature superconducting circuits were possible, and thankfully for a bunch of reasons no one has created them yet, all relating to the breaks in cryptography. They otherwise have some great benefits. So this is my way of saying that civilians will never have direct access to this technology, probably from day one or possibly even ever. So do not let any company use fancy value propositions about owning handheld quantum devices. They might be misleading you. And yes, unfortunately, I put this in because there's already companies doing this, especially one because there is an Australian company doing this. I'm not going to name them. The only organisations in the world that will have ready access to this technology is nation states. Whatever we're calling the FANG-like companies today, so you know the ones. IBM, who's doing a lot of research in this field, and a handful of other companies that are doing research in this field. But that's going to have implications if you've ever had designs of playing with this shiny new technology as it comes out. Couple more observations, and so for some context. Originally, it was calculated that 4,000 error-free qubits would be what it's required to break an RSA 2048-bit key. At the time, the largest quantum CPU processor was around 100 qubits, so a mile short. They're up to, I think, roughly 1,000 qubits in a CPU at the moment, but still scaling it from 1,000 to 4,000 is a huge feat of engineering that may have problems as time goes on. IBM's quantum roadmap say they have the path forward to 4,000 qubits in the next couple of years. I think from memory it was 2026. And I'm a huge IBM fan, but and, you know, their quantum team is stocked full of very, very smart people, probably smarter than me. But I kind of say, prove it. Do what you say you can. I think there might be manufacturing problems as time goes on. I could be wrong. But I would, you know, rather than believe the value proposition of another distant but it's absolutely going to work technology, I think we should sort of cut through some of the pseudoscience on this and just ask companies like these to continue their work. It's a very important work, but it does come with a lot of marketing claims that cannot be proved today. Their approach doesn't make use of a single 4,000 qubit CPU, mind you. It uses smaller quantum CPUs over a cluster. There's probably a couple of things that could go wrong with that as they're trying to scale up. And there's also no consensus about actually how many qubits it would take to break an RSA 2048-bit key. 4,000 is less likely, or less. There's less consensus around it these days. IBM still kind of, I think they might be pushing that line still, but there's a more recent piece of research that says approximately 20,000 noisy qubits, i.e. error-prone qubits, is what's required to build RSA 2048 bits. So in terms of capabilities break RSA 2048 right now, that's just not going to happen. But that doesn't mean we can sit idle for these sorts of things, which we'll get to in a sec. So the estimates of when quantum computing becomes a problem for us, such that the quantum algorithms become a problem for us, is widely speculative. No one actually can tell you an honest answer on this because we just genuinely don't know. We think, but we don't quite know. My personal guess, and it's not one you should put stock in, it's between 15 and 45 years, possibly never at all. And I know that doesn't exactly seem helpful, but I'm sort of beginning to think that it is another fad of a technology. We've proven it works, but I'm concerned about the commercial viability of this kind of technology. We have science that fails all the time simply because it can't scale in the economic realm. So we'll see what happens in the next 10 to 20 years, I guess. All right, so time for me to confess. I made a bit of a mistake as I was designing a strategy piece for quantum resistance, and it's a simple little mistake. I've actually done these sort of critical infrastructure, head-to-toe review of cryptography pieces before. And the organisation I'm referring to that I've just recently completed out the work is for an organisation I won't name, but I'll refer to them here as Acme. When I did the previous work of this calibre for a different organisation, quantum wasn't a factor. All right, my notes are here. So in that particular job, I got a pretty strange request from the board of this company. It was in 2018, roughly. And the board had read a Big Four consulting piece about how the top 10 things for the board needs to worry about in 2018 next year is going to be quantum computing. It's just peak pseudoscience because not in line with reality or the facts, as I would say. So I got that question. It was very easy for me to respond and say, in the next 2 years, quantum's not going to be a thing for you, so you don't need to worry about it. And the mistake was, when I took on this job with Acme, I scoped it up more or less kind of in the same way I did the last one, and I forgot to retest my own my own assumptions and calculations on whether quantum would be a factor. And I only remembered to do that halfway through actually doing the job, and what I came out with was a critical infrastructure organisation probably needs to start moving towards quantum resistance this year, if not next. While there's a lot of years ahead, there's also a lot of work for critical infrastructure organisations to achieve quantum resistance, and they're not particularly known for moving fast. So live and learn. The need for me to act with due care and skill, it even gets me from time to time. It just, mid-job, lose a bit of money, but put in the pathway for quantum resistance, and that's how this work sort of came into a quantum resistance focus. Sorry. Oh my God, sorry. Okay. No, I've lost my place. Sorry, so sorry. Okay, here we go. All right. Quantum resistance requires that you can withstand quantum attacks from what's known as Shor's algorithm, which, given sufficiently large quantum CPU, is a full break of widely used asymmetric mathematics, including integer integer factorization mathematics, including RSA, and discrete logarithm mathematics, DSA and ECDSA. There's also Grover's algorithm, and that's a partial break of symmetric algorithms. And again, this is on the assumption that there's a sufficiently large quantum CPU. That is key because Shor's is a mathematical proof that we can break these. It just needs a big enough CPU to do it, but the CPU doesn't exist yet. So that's what we're looking at here is how fast can they perfect the technology, if they can perfect the technology. But anyway, back to Grover's. There's a partial break of symmetric algorithms, including AES. And the partial break is due to a quadratic improvement in speed, which translates to halving of the key space and effectively halves the time taken to brute force the key. All right, so if potentially quantum computers are so far away, why do any of this? A couple of reasons. No one can really predict when a sufficiently large quantum computer will come into existence, but if it does happen, when it does happen, it may be quicker than we realise. We can't predict these things. And usually with these sorts of things, someone finds the solution to the problem that's been holding them back, and then it just goes. And we find this all the time in cryptography and hardware cryptography design, but something stands for 30 years, but then all of a sudden, like 5 people attack it 5 different ways and get their solution. So it can be a little difficult to perfectly predict when a large enough quantum CPU will come about such that Shor's and Grover's will be effective. But there are other reasons. There's retrospective decryption, which you might know as capture now, decrypt later, or harvest now, decrypt later. These kind of attacks are happening right now. It's within nation states' capabilities today to record everything on networks that they monitor, store that traffic, and wait until the day that they can unlock it. They do. Some of the biggest nation states do have this capability. There's an extraordinary amount of work that's required to go to quantum resistance as well. For instance, I was looking at sort of some of the timelines, and it may take ACME 10 to 20 years to be able to fully realise that whole strategy. So it's actually kind of important that they start, and all critical infrastructure industries start their process now. I'm not saying we're going to be rolling out new devices and new software tomorrow. That's not how this works. But they do have to have a plan, and they do need to start moving towards that plan pretty much now. Because if they're going to get there in 10 years, they need to start the process. I think it's also going to be cheaper in the long run to do it now. I was unfortunately, at the start of my career, a part of the Y2K disruption. As I recall, IT asked business to fix that problem a long time prior to it actually being fixed. And a lot of the times, there was just pushback for the expenditure to, fix some code or test some code. And it got to the point where about 3 to 4 years prior to the event is when everyone panicked and we had the event that it was. That was hugely expensive. That's a very expensive way to run a project in software and hardware. And when you're talking about cryptography hardware and software, they are quite expensive already. So try to... I'm saying we should probably try to avoid last-minute fixes. I think it'll be cheaper if we do it on the low and the slow, basically. And ACME, like all other CI organisations, are very slow-moving when it comes to technology acquisition. It's going to take all organisations, but especially CI organisations, to source technology that support the new algorithms to make this happen. So the path to quantum resistance doesn't require ownership or knowledge of a quantum computer. The nation states and the FANGs will own those. We won't. But what you do need to know about, what you do need for quantum resistance is what algorithms you have in your organisation already, where they are, so that you know how and when you can replace them at a time when we start rolling out quantum resistance algorithms. This is something that every company I've ever worked for on cryptography or key management has pretty poorly fared with. So if you're not in a position to tell me exactly what algorithms you have, what trust chains you have, what PKIs you have, what private keys of whatever you have, and where you have them on every single device in your organisation, don't feel bad. This is quite common, unfortunately, but in order to make a pathway to quantum resistance, we probably need to do the things that we know in classical cryptography we should be doing better. Let's take a look at some of the algorithms though. So this was Suite B cryptography. If you know this history, you'll know that there was a list of cryptographic algorithms. There was Suite A that was reserved for defence cryptography, and Suite B was the civilian thing. That's stocked full of SHA-2, AES, ECDH, ECDSA. It was released in 2005. It was deprecated in 2018. Now, curiously, its replacement, which is called the Commercial NSA Suite, Cryptography Suite 1.0, put RSA back on the list, and that has led to speculation within the civilian cryptography community that there may be a breach on ECC. There's also speculation that it's just simply that the NSA have done the mathematics on the timelines for quantum resistance, so they're not going to waste any more time spending money trying to push ECC out there as they had been for 15 years. We don't know, we probably won't ever know, but the upshot of all of that is that RSA is back in commercial NSA cryptography suite. It just has to be 3072-bit or larger. There's ECDSA a little bit, and some more SHA-2 and some AES. This is the best possible list of algorithms today, but I don't at all suspect it will be the final list. We'll get to that in a sec. So your PKIs will probably be running crystals dilithium. You might also be running PKIs to run code signing of your software and your firmware using LMS or XMSS. And SHA-2 is still there, it's just increased a little, and AES is there. We increased AES to twice the size a couple of years back to defeat the fact that Grover's cut the key space in half, so that's currently the fix. I'm not sure what happens if someone improves Grover's, and that has me a little concerned. All right, so CNSA 2.0 won't be the end of this either. NIST just finalised the CNSA 2 algorithms, which are now known as FIPS 203, FIPS 204 and FIPS 205, so you'll be able to get the public docs on that sort of stuff if you want. And FIPS 206 is now in IPD status, so that's a commentary period. So I'm expecting that there will be further updates to the CNSA list over time. You'll find that CNSA will bleed into NIST standards, and they'll also bleed into ISM standards. So I've sort of taken the approach on this strategy that because I know where CNSA and NSA's cryptography goes, I'm just, the ISM wasn't there at the time that I wrote in the requirement for the strategy to go to CNSA 2.0, but I knew it was going to land there eventually. All right, so how do we get an organisation to move on an issue when it's seemingly so far away and the existing crypto systems are already treated with, that's a typo, low care and low skill? Basically, the way ACME is treating it, the way the strategy is designed, is a two-phased approach. Fix your basics first. For the next 5 years, build into your organisations, into your people, your process and your technology, the skills to work on cryptography and key management if you don't have them. Fix up what you know to be a problem and implement your compliance to CNSA 1, which does align with ISM and NIST and a bunch of others. And in a second part of that approach, once you've built up internally within your teams the skills to rapidly swap out algorithms, start to make the move towards quantum resistance in the 10 years after that. Your goal should be to implement compliance with CNSA 2 or any later version. At a minimum, I'm not saying put these 6 into a document and call it your strategy. Don't do that. There was a lot more in ACME's strategy. They did relate to localised problems, so that's why I don't bring them here. You will have your own localised problems that need to be addressed in strategy as well, but for strategy 1, clarify your management intent about cryptography and key management. Things I'm looking at here as an auditor is if you have a policy document, does it use policy language and not technical language or training language as they often do? Does it have buy-in from the C-suite? Is it regularly updated? Is it actually relied upon and used by your people and linked to your processes? Does it define what some of your staff should do in the event of a non-conformance to the policy? Does it require systems that are non-conformant to be added to the risk register for mitigation and treatment? And within the organisation's people, I want to see that the policy document's actually used. Don't write a policy document and stick it in a drawer like just about everyone else does. I want to see that there's an active conversation between management labour on issues of cryptography. I know it's not sexy taking the word cryptography to the board or to your C-suite, but it does kind of need to happen with this level of technological change. All right, for strategy 2, increase your oversight and compliance. Things I'm checking for there. Oh, sorry, I will say about strategy 1, and I'll say this about all of them. Anything less than those kind of things within your cryptography and key management means that you might not be operating safely and means I might one day find a break in it. So for strategy 2, your oversight and compliance, I want to know if your audit function collects enough evidence to make certain inferences and assertions about the state of your environment. What is the quality of their evidence collection and storage? Does your audit function perform scheduled and random audits of all trusted root CAs and immediate CA stores on all endpoint devices? I want to know when you're trusting devices that you didn't know you were trusting. At will, can you manually or automatically determine what the trusted root stores or where the private keys are on any given device? And when conformance, when non-conformance isn't there, is it immediately remediated, or is it being sent to risk register to be remediated, or what happens? Is audit just collecting results and then stashing it in a vault somewhere and not doing anything about it? These are the kind of things I'm looking for there. Manage the supply chain is the hardest one of them all. The problem with quantum resistance is it's both a supply chain risk issue and a technical problem to be engineered around. There's any number of suppliers that you buy from who don't do quantum resistance, have no quantum resistance plan themselves, and you rely on them to get you there. You're buying that technology, and how many times are you buying that technology that it will knowingly not get there? The kind of things I'm looking for there is what's your supply chain assessment? Do you get software bombs and other key component information from your suppliers? Are they being evaluated on their roadmap towards quantum resistance, which is a new part I had to add as a part of this work in this strategy. Within the ACME strategy, we basically said we're going to start tagging on every tender and every procurement action a little rider to the vendors that we're working with to let them know that quantum resistance is important to us, and over in the next couple of years you as a vendor may be judged on that. I've worked in for product and software vendors for long enough to know how to get them to move on issues they don't want to move on. It's usually before you sign the contract or before you sign the purchase order, ask them for something. Because as soon as you sign wet signatures, you're bound by those terms of contracts. You can't get them to change. This is why we're doing this now. It's the supply chain aspect of it. Every network device, every one of the 3 major desktop operating systems, every browser, every mobile device, and in critical infrastructure organisations, things like PLCs, SCADAs, HMIs, HVAC and other IoT systems all have their own cryptography algorithms in them. And we now have to tell every one of those vendors that quantum resistance is important to us. It's a huge undertaking. It's going to take years. So that's why we're not leaving it to the last minute. We're going to embed that into the supply chain. We're going to tell our procurement function that the first step for them is to make it known to the vendors that at a future point we will be judging their products and services based on their capacity to meet our standards for quantum resistant cryptography. And at a second stage, we will be judging those who can meet our future timelines for compliance. The CNSA 2.0 has its own timeline. It's a very aggressive timeline, and I don't think ACME can get there. So we've picked alternative dates that are just slightly nudged in the future, and you might want to do that too. But you'll need to pick a date, like a hard date that you want to move to it. And then a third stage to that is that after that date, if you are not compliant with the quantum resistance algorithms that we want in your products, we're not going to buy you. We're giving vendors a very long leeway here because it's going to be a difficult undertaking. It's going to cost them money, but the reality of it is that we depend on them doing a thing before we can do a thing. And that's the issue here. So these are the kind of things I'm looking. Is your supply chain checking that good when I audit your crypto systems? Now, in terms of the technical aspects, in terms of cryptography, CNSA 2.0 until the ISM or NIST updates to more than those kinds of standards. If you're a CI organisation, you're using IEC 62443 is your guiding light for that usually. We are finding a way to comply to that and CNSA at the same time. And I suggest you probably do the same. The IEC documents, the ISO documents, they don't update very often. It's like once every decade. And the rate at which algorithms are now going to come at us all is going to be more rapid than that. So there needs to be a way for you to comply to your base compliance in the form of ISO and IEC 62443, but at the same time progress into this massive undertaking of technological change that is coming in the next decade or two. With key management practices, that was a weird one. Critical infrastructure organisations, and in my experience, most organisations in Australia do not use the one thing that all organisations should, and every cryptographer says you should. That is the use of FIPS 140 certified HSMs. With the way key stealing works and credential escalation works on Windows networks these days, it is, if you do not have a HSM, a FIPS 140-2 or FIPS 140-3 certified HSM operating in your environment, I will tell you that you are not operating safely. The cost for this stuff is not cheap, but it has come down, and these things, they massively make a difference to key security. The policy, the strategy suggested that, we wrote into it that what we call sensitive keys are what should be protected by these devices. So sensitive keys got defined as all private keys of CAs, all KMIP devices, and any KMIP keys issued by the KMIP device. All administrators who authenticate via certificate-based authentication and code signing keys. So if we put in a rider in there to say, and anything else by the CISO or the person who designates authority to operate or something like that. So we've defined this classification of what is a sensitive key, and we're saying that moving forward, they must be stored in an approved FIPS 140-2, FIPS 140-3, or FIPS 201-3, which is YubiKeys. And the reason is it basically eradicates key theft or makes it extremely hard. It takes the scale out of remote theft out of your credentials. It will not be 100% proof positive, but what I'd say to you is that there's just no way to protect a key on general purpose operating systems like Windows, Linux and Mac using just the software protections. There's a couple of reasons for that. General purpose operating systems are not built for key storage. They're not built for cryptographic purposes. They have a few little things thrown in, but they have two weaknesses. All of them do. The first is that they use discretionary access controls to monitor file systems, and they use a super user account. So the first thing an adversary needs to do to steal your keys is to find some sort of system or root privilege and then just take what they want from the discretionary access control system. It's just no safe way to operate key storage short of a physically separate and hardened storage device. So if you're not using one of those, please reconsider it. The last one's a strange one. Essentially, with moving towards hardware-protected storage, there might be a temptation for employees to subvert some of the physical controls. Like a YubiKey can actually be NFC read. If a YubiKey is taped to a phone, it's permanently being read all the time. And that's exactly the sort of thing we don't want. We want to impose cost on the adversary such that it requires them to only get access to make an attempt on the key once a physical action happens. So that means the trigger button on the YubiKey gets pressed, or USB gets inserted into a slot, or in HSM, a smart card card gets inserted in a smart card. So this is what we've written in the strategy is that all user-based authentications should, if possible, require physical touch of a human. And I know that's kind of annoying, but it actually will greatly impede the ability for the adversary to steal your cryptography keys. I think that's it. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'll take them now. But I did want to thank BSides Canberra, my co-speakers throughout the day, the delegates. You were all fantastic too, and especially ACME, who allowed me to talk on this subject, because I don't normally get to talk about what I do because I'm under non-disclosures and that sort of thing.
Well, thank you very much. Let's give Stewart a round of applause.